everyone has. Great. Hello and welcome, everybody. I'm Carrie Ernst. I'm a CL psychiatrist at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York, and I'm chair of the mentorship subcommittee for ACLP. And I'm very, very happy today to be working with the annual meeting committee and subcommittee and chair and vice chair to present to you this workshop on tips and tricks for developing annual meeting submissions. We're going to go through the different type of submissions that you could
You okay?
if people could also mute themselves. If you're just joining, welcome to everyone. So we're going to go through best practices for developing different types of submissions, thinking about the different types that exist. How do you choose? How do you put together a submission? We have the following people who are listed here. We have our program chair and assistant program chair. We have representation from the pre-conference courses, the DEI subcommittee, oral papers and posters, as well as the general session. So this was just an overview. We're going to hear in order. We're going to hear first about oral papers and poster submissions. Then we're going to hear about general sessions, previously known as workshops and symposia. We'll hear about pre-conference courses. We'll hear about advancing our mission of DEI through your annual meeting submissions. And then we'll end with just a brief summary on tips for crafting submissions and some time for Q&A. We are recording this, so you can also feel free to access it on the website after this meeting. So with that, I will turn it over to Amy and Anne.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Amy Bauer. I am this year's program chair, and I am joined here by Anne Gross, who's the assistant program chair. And we're really delighted to be able to serve in this role this year and help put together what I think will be a fabulous meeting this year. So maybe we can advance the slides. All right, so our meeting will be in Miami, Florida this year, November 6th to 9th. It will be, as last year in Austin, a live in-person meeting. We will be live streaming it for virtual attendance. We know that for a variety of reasons, not everyone who wants to participate can come in person. So we will definitely be keeping the virtual opportunities available and actually expanding this year. I want to talk for a moment about our meeting theme for this year, which is promoting whole health through innovative and integrative approaches to CL psychiatry. We're really excited about the meeting theme this year, which will bring together a focus on evidence-based integrative medicine and holistic care for patients in improving mental health. So I'm going to actually read to you a little bit that was written by our president, Madeline Becker, who selected the meeting theme this year. That integrative medicine combines conventional medicine with complementary practices to optimize health and can be used to expand CL psychiatry's expertise in the psychiatric care of the whole person. Integrative medicine focuses on physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual, environmental, community, and population-based approaches to patient care. So hopefully there's something in there for everybody. And I think that's what this really does. It takes the work that we do as CL psychiatrists and leverages the expertise that we already have in biopsychosocial care of the person and really pushes that to important frontiers in the practice of medicine by incorporating in public health approaches around health promotion and disease prevention, by focusing on interventions that go above and beyond our more typical armamentarium of psychopharmacology and psychotherapy, to include things like therapeutic lifestyle, nutritional complementary approaches. What do those mean? Things like physical activity, diet, focusing on sleep, lifestyle, other types of modalities that have an evidence base for improving mental health. Things like vitamins and supplements, acupuncture, art therapy, thinking really broadly about interventions that can be beneficial for whole person care. and really nurturing our patients in their all aspects of their care to help them achieve optimal mental health and healing. So this is our meeting theme. Happy to entertain questions about that, which I think we'll be doing at the end, because I think that this is a new and exciting area and a little bit different from prior annual meeting themes. I will also, that reminds me, I will make a quick point of housekeeping, which is that I'm going to stay on the call for the first hour and then have to hop off to one of our other planning meetings for this meeting. But Anne will be staying on to the end to help with Q&A. So we have an excellent lineup of plenary speakers. We are working out some of the kind of final details around the timing and hoping to get some announcements out soon around that. We will be having for the second year the research colloquium on Wednesday. There will again be an advanced practice provider pre-conference course on Wednesday, and we'll have a fun debate as well. We're excited about some new things that we have to offer this year, and one in particular that I'm going to highlight is a new pre-conference course that will be free for all ACLP members who attend the in-person meeting. This is an advocacy skills for physicians leading change in the practice of medicine. So more to come on that, but we really are hoping that this will help draw in more people to come to some of the excellent programming that we'll have on Wednesday. We will have an awards toast to celebrate our award winners this year, and are going to, as always, be providing vibrant opportunities for mentorship, networking, and socializing. So that is kind of an overview of the meeting as a whole. I'm going to call out a couple of things related to the types of submissions that you all might be doing. And this is a little bit of preview because you'll be hearing more from each of these subcommittees as we go forward. So the first one that I'm very excited about is that we will be having more general sessions, oral papers, and posters. We have more slots this year. That means more abstracts will be accepted, and we're really excited about that. I think as the Academy has grown over the years, the quality and volume actually of the submissions we're receiving has been increasing as always, and we really want to include as much of that great programming as we can. So very excited that we will have the opportunity to do that. As last year, all submissions will require a DEIA statement. This will be used and considered in assessing the overall quality of the submission. And so you'll hear more about that later this morning. And a couple of new changes that we're making. This year, oral papers, people who submit for an oral paper will have the option of selecting either a live in-person format or a recorded format for virtual presentation. And so what this will do is it'll offer the opportunity for us to accept more papers and from those authors who might not be able to attend in person. That'll be a selection you can make when you submit your abstract. We're also making a small change to the posters. There will be a maximum of one accepted poster per presenting author. You can be a contributing author on more than one poster, but we really want to make sure that people who have an accepted poster are available to present their poster. If you end up with the fortunate situation where you are on multiple accepted posters, then you would need to nominate one of your co-authors to be the presenting author so that you are presenting on one. So more on that later. And then the final thing that I wanted to highlight is that the general sessions this year, which have previously been called workshops and symposia, and for those of you with a longer memory, these also used to be called general sessions and various other things going back in time. This year will be 75 minutes in length. that is a change from last year when they were 90 minutes, and we'll have a maximum of 4 speakers. So sessions will be slightly shorter. Hopefully that will inspire everybody to really tighten their content and have what it allows us to do is actually to offer more sessions so that people will get more variety throughout the day. And in general, we're still looking for educational strategies that match the session's objectives. And so what that means is that there's a variety of ways that you could use your time during a general session, and you should just be prepared to discuss in your submission kind of what your strategies are and how that fits. I think that is all that I wanted to cover in the broadest way. Since it looks like we're a couple of minutes ahead of schedule, I will say what I should have said at the beginning, which is a huge thank you to all of the folks who are helping to plan this meeting. There's a lot of people who are involved, both all the chairs of our subcommittees and their vice chairs, and a variety of committee members. And we are also putting out the call for volunteer abstract reviewers. So it really is, it takes a community to put on a meeting of this scope. And I'm so grateful for all of the tremendous contributions that everybody is making to the program. And even more so to all of you who are submitting abstracts, because this is really the heart and soul of our meeting. And the reason that it's great is because people keep bringing amazing things to the call for abstract every year. So with that, I am going to pause. Let me see, Anne, is there any other highlights that you want to make sure that we cover kind of before we get to the Q&A?
I think you did a great job, and like Amy mentioned, I will be here for the duration if additional questions come up that I can help answer. But I think great overview. Thank you, Amy.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for organizing this, Carrie, and putting this all together.
Great. So with that, we'll turn it over to Dr. Michael Peterson, who's chair of our Oral Papers and Posters Subcommittee.
All right, thank you. I'm glad to join this, and second year of doing this kind of preparatory webinar, and hopefully it's useful for people. So I am a CL psychiatrist at the University of Wisconsin, and I am currently chairing the Oral Papers and Posters Subcommittee. So a little bit about the format. So the brief oral papers, or BOPs as we sometimes refer to them as, are short, approximately 10-minute presentations by a single presenter. Usually that's a PowerPoint type of presentation where the presenter will go through their content. And we tend to group those into sessions based on topics. So we try to have speakers with related topic areas in each individual session. Now, kind of like the general sessions this year, they're going from 90 minutes to 75 minutes. So we'll have fewer sessions, fewer speakers per session, but we will be having more sessions, so more speakers and papers will be accepted overall this year. So in addition to those 10-minute presentations, there's a moderator from our subcommittee who will lead the session. They'll introduce the speakers and keep track of time, and then they'll also lead the Q&A at the end of that session. So this year, the differences really are that there's going to be, these will be 75-minute sessions, so with fewer speakers. And also there will be some of these brief oral papers that will be recorded for people to view offline or in an asynchronous way. So stay tuned for that as well. Next is posters. Probably everybody's familiar with posters. So numerically, there's by far the most posters of any kind of presentation at the meeting. So this is a way of presenting your work in a printed format. So putting the poster up. And then it's really important, though, to be with your poster for that session, because not only is it the printed material, it's the chance to interact with people who are interested in that topic and content. So we'll have the in-person session at the meeting where people present their posters. Posters, the printed work is divided into structured sections to lead the discussion. And it can often be useful these days to keep the presentation more visually appealing and easier to follow, to have QR codes or other ways of linking to additional content online, so you don't have to pack in all the text on your physical poster. Next slide. So a few notes about these formats. So both the oral papers and the posters are great ways to present recent research results, projects that are in development or in progress, or other types of kind of developmental work. These are often going to be stronger submissions and more likely to be accepted the more results that you have. But generally, these are not publication ready. So don't worry about it if it's not ready for full journal submission. It can still be in progress. It's a great way to get feedback on work that you're doing, particularly for early career folks and trainees. Sorry, I think somebody maybe is not muted. If you could please mute yourself. Thank you. But this is a great way to present works in progress, and particularly when you're earlier in your career or as you're a trainee, it's a great way to get feedback from more senior members or other potential collaborators who are doing similar kinds of work. There are fewer brief oral paper slots available compared to posters. This is increasing, so there'll be more opportunities that way. If you submit your work as a brief oral paper abstract, you do have the option to check off and say that if you are not accepted for a brief oral paper, it will be considered for being accepted as a poster presentation. And there's many more posters accepted than other presentation types, even though we had a record number of poster submissions last year and anticipate we'll probably have the same again. As Amy had mentioned earlier, the meeting space is going to allow us to have more posters to be presented this year, so hopefully a larger percentage of our submissions can be accepted. Next slide. So what makes a good submission, and how to write a good abstract? So the abstracts are very short. It's only 450 words, so you really have to be very clear and concise with your writing. Make sure you've reviewed it and edited it and gotten feedback from others to make sure it's as strong as possible. Strongest abstracts are going to have very clear aims as far as what you're looking at and what you're trying to accomplish with this work. Make sure that it's clear what the relevance to CL psychiatry is, both broadly or in a specific area, and how it contributes to the field. So how is this work furthering our understanding, education, or knowledge about particular areas of CL psychiatry? For presentations or submissions that are related to research type of work, having a good study design and scientific rigor in your structure of the study is going to be very helpful. And the more data and appropriate analysis of the data that you have, the stronger it is. Now, there's a caveat. Not all of these, we don't expect that everybody's going to have their complete data. Many submissions will say that data collection is in progress, and analysis will be presented at the time of the meeting. It is important to keep in mind, though, that if you're not able to collect the data, that people may have to withdraw that abstract before the actual presentation. Next slide. So this is the breakdown of the content in the abstract. So we'll ask for a background and significance of the project, of the proposal. What are your methods? What are your results? And this is where you'll specify that if you have incomplete data or if you're still collecting data, you'll be asked to attest that you expect to have the data by the time of the presentation in November. The results section is not needed for case reports. There's a discussion section, and then your conclusions and implications, and also space for a small number of references. One additional specifier is that work presented or submitted for a presentation should not have been published before April of 2024. So which is the submission deadline. If it has been presented elsewhere, but you have novel content or further work that you've done, please make it clear why you're submitting it for presentation again and what the additional work that will be presented is. Publication after the time of submission, so between April and November of 2024, you must cite where it's presented in your brief oral presentation or in your poster. Next slide. So authors, be careful and conscientious when you're submitting your list of authors and co-authors. After submission, you're not able to make any submissions or additions or substitutions, nor are you able to change the order of authors after the submission deadline. The presenting author designation can be assigned to any of the authors associated with the submission, can be changed up to a week before the meeting starts. This may not be completely reflected in the printed materials or online materials for the meeting, but you're able to do that. As mentioned earlier, this is a change for this year in that for posters, you can only be the presenting author for one poster. So this will be important to note how you can change this up to the meeting time. That way it meets these requirements. And I guess I'll just say too, that change is really because the poster session, that interaction with the people visiting your poster is such a critical and enjoyable part of the posters. We really wanted to maximize that as much as possible by allowing people to focus on their one poster that they're presenting. Next. So some specifics on case reports. It's really common to have case reports submitted for posters and sometimes for brief oral papers. If you're submitting a case, it should be novel in a particular way. So either it's a quite unusual etiology or presentation that hasn't been covered elsewhere, or if it's a more common presentation that there's a new clinical approach, diagnostic assessment, interpretation, theory, or other particular learning point that hasn't really been presented elsewhere. Discussion and interpretation of the case should be based on existing literature and best clinical science. And really consider the following points. So is there is that unique point of view or angle or teaching point really clearly described here? Is your point of view that you're sharing supported through the description of the case and through relevant literature? And lastly, is there a rationale for the point of view? So including some discussion about alternate points of view, why this point of view was chosen, etc. Because there are often very many case reports submitted, it's really important to consider these things to make it as strong as possible and to increase your chances of having your case report accepted. Next. For brief oral papers, this is probably the best place for presenting original research that's kind of a work in progress or early on in the process. And it's a good way to disseminate new developments in CL psychiatry. Often it's your own project and some sort of research, but it can also be an appropriate place for a meaningful literature review on a topic with or without an including case. And those things can be considered, particularly if the content contributes in an important way to the literature or to our field and advances the knowledge base. These are more competitive on average than posters, just because there are fewer slots. Next. Posters, you really get a wide range here, and because many more posters are accepted, it's really common to have early projects or projects in development, presenting case reports, topic review, some sorts of literature review. It's very common to have trainees and early career folks presenting posters as well. And it's an outstanding opportunity for networking. We've really had great attendance at our poster sessions, especially as we've been getting back to our in-person meetings, and really want to maximize that chance for the poster presenters to meet with other attendees and get feedback and potentially set up new collaborations and communications. So one of the authors on the poster must be the designated presenter. And not to harp on this too much, but as stated before, the change for this year is that you can only be the presenting author on a single poster. You can be an author, a contributing author on multiple posters, though. Okay, next slide. So trainee status, particularly for posters, this is important. So these are the criteria to be considered as a trainee poster, which then makes you eligible for a trainee poster award. Trainee designation refers to students, residents, and fellows. that you must be in trainee status at the time of submission. So in the next month here, when the abstract deadline comes up, you still need to be a trainee, even though some may not be trainees at the time of the meeting in November. The trainee must be a substantial contributor to the work, and the trainee must be the first author on the abstract and the presenter of the poster at the conference. Next. So how do we evaluate submissions and decide what's accepted? So the criteria that we use are in some broad categories here. So clinical applicability, or you could also call that relevance to CL psychiatry. Originality, so how novel is the content? What is the scientific rigor? So study design, the data, appropriate analysis. Clarity of the writing. And also, as noted, we also consider the DEI contribution. So that part of your abstract is also part of our overall evaluation process. Both the content and or the presenters may be relevant to that. Next. So in person, so once we have accepted abstracts for presentation at the poster session, we do a final round of reviews at the actual live poster session. And the things we evaluate there is when we meet with the poster presenters, what is their knowledge of the project and the content, and how do they field questions from the reviewers? Next. Mentoring. So we really encourage the submitting authors to make use of your co-authors and mentors who are involved with the project. Because of the huge number of poster abstracts as well as brief oral paper abstracts that are submitted, the brief oral papers and poster subcommittee is really unable to provide individualized feedback or specific contents to the submitters of the abstracts. Next. Poster awards. The last criteria, so we evaluate the abstracts and then the in-person session. The complete poster has to be uploaded by mid-October before the annual conference. And that's how we do some of our grading as well. And then that final on-site grading at the live poster session, where we also present the awards to the poster presenters. Next. There are 3 categories of awards that we have. So general poster awards, which includes all posters submitted. Trainee poster awards, which are only posters presented by a trainee status person. And then lastly, a case report poster award. Okay, next. And that's all the content I have for right now, and I will be able to stay available for questions at the end as well.
Thank you so much. Okay, and I see I'm not able to look at the chat as I'm sharing slides, but my co-presenters, certainly if there are things in the chat that you can answer, please feel free to do so. So next, our next session, we're going to talk about for the best practices for general sessions, previously known as workshops and symposia. We have the chair is Natalie Jakubowski and the vice chair, Margaret Cinderella. We have Dr. Cinderella here with us to talk about it. So I'm going to turn it over to her.
Hi, I hope everyone can hear me. So I am the vice chair of this committee, and I'm going to do my best to kind of provide some context for the main changes, both in the language surrounding workshops and symposia. And as I'm sure many of you are curious about the reasons behind reducing the session length and number of speakers. So workshops and symposia are moving to more of a general session language. We'll talk about the reason for the language change on a future slide. At time of submission, you will still specify whether you prefer an in-person or a virtual presentation. Previously, workshops were in person and symposia were more virtual. The 90-minute length that we had been used to over the last few years has been reduced to 75 minutes. And we've gone from a maximum of 5 speakers to a maximum of 4 speakers. The upside of these changes is that we've gone from about 45 to about 65 live sessions. And the hope is that we'll be able to accept more sessions, clearly, but also to accept some sessions that might be more niche than we were previously able to accept when we had a much lower limit. I don't know if we're going to accept exactly 65. I believe there are some pre-invited courses and some of the slots might be used for other sort of educational material, but that's basically the number of 75-minute slots that we are going to have. Next slide. So general guidelines on the general sessions. The majority of the content in the overall program meeting is going to be targeted to general CL psychiatrists. That doesn't mean that some really interesting kind of niche content might get accepted. I know there was a mitochondria workshop that was accepted to the meeting last year and unfortunately canceled last minute, but most of it should be applicable to the person practicing general adult CL psychiatry. We will generally prioritize sessions that incorporate theme, although not every session across all 65 sessions are going to need to incorporate the theme. And that will be promoting whole health through integrative approaches, consideration of a holistic perspective towards patient care, and within that sphere, focusing on the evidence base, because there's actually a decent evidence base for many of the integrative and nutritional approaches. Presenters should attempt to address healthcare inequities in a topic being presented. For example, if you're presenting on nutritional psychiatry, you might want to talk a little bit about food deserts and how they impact a subset of our patients. And the speaker roster should generally reflect the Diversity Academy via speakers of diverse identity, geography, institution, and also of diverse career stage. Next slide. So major items that reviewers are considering when scoring abstracts, as previously stated, topics of broad interest and relevance, ability to enrich participant engagement and interactivity. We are also looking for originality similar to the poster group. So we don't want the exact same presentation that was previously presented at the APA in May, just repackaged for November. And we also want diversity of topics. We'll also consider abstract strength. We'll talk about that more. And we want the content to be generally appropriate for the duration of 75 minutes. We'll take a look at the speaker panel diversity and also the potential for conflicts of interest. And then hot, timely topics identified by previous general session committee members include clinical innovation like interventional psychiatry. With the meeting theme, I am hoping that somebody presents on psychedelics, although I am not qualified to do so, and also business and non-academic implementation of our training. Next slide. So these are the features of a well-written abstract, and then I've got actually, I think the next couple slides after this are the highest scoring abstract from the 2023 meeting. So generally, abstracts should be well organized and well written and clearly define the content and the timeline or plan for the presentation. We are looking for background information and outline of the content and learning objectives. Although what a good abstract looks like is going to look very different if you're doing more of an information delivery traditional lecture style versus if you're doing a choose your own adventure style presentation versus if you're doing an expert panel. So we don't have kind of as stringent guidelines for what a good abstract looks like as the poster group does for this is what a good case report looks like. Next slide. So this is actually the highest scoring abstract from the 2023 meeting. I'll give everyone kind of a second to review the abstract. What really stood out to me was how clear and explicit they were within the 450 word limit about what you were going to get out of going to this session. Next slide. So on the next slide, they go through talking about kind of the different cases. It looks like they had some cases in mind and left themselves leeway to include late-breaking, interesting cases when they put this abstract together. And they also talk about the qualifications for each presenting author and why they were included in the presentation. What I think is interesting about this abstract in particular is they include people who are not CL psychiatrists. They have a neuropsychiatrist and also a neuroradiologist, and that generally fits within what we consider to be a diverse speaker panel. Next slide. These are the learning objectives from that abstract, and you can see that the learning objectives, so learning and practicing skills, really match the format of the presentation. So they're teaching you how to identify regions. They're teaching you how to identify when neuroimaging should be recommending and what modality to recommend. This is generally going to be more of a skills building session than it is a knowledge transfer session, or the two kind of buckets that we look in. Next slide. So abstracts are generally not accepted are abstracts that promote only one institution program, although if that same abstract we just looked at had a CL psychiatrist, a neuropsychiatrist, and a radiologist all from the same institution, that'll probably be better received than an abstract that has 3 CL psychiatrists from the same institution. Formats that lack clear learning objectives, if the session format does not match the learning objectives, contain insufficient content to fill 75 minutes, include only 1 to 2 presenters, lack originality, or are a single case report or otherwise more appropriate for another format. And kind of speaking to the, sorry, go back one. Kind of speaking to the session format matching the learning objectives, if you've got a panel of really excellent lecturers who give great lectures at the ACLP every couple of years, that's great. But the learning objectives for that panel should look more like learn about this item than develop this skill if the session format is primarily didactic. Next slide. I also wanted to shed a little bit of light on the review process. So the first round of reviews are conducted by volunteers. So if any of you are looking to volunteer, we would love to have you. We make an effort to match volunteer area of expertise with the content area of the presentation, although it's challenging numerically to do that. After this phase, the highest and lowest scoring abstracts are accepted or rejected. And then in the second round of the reviews are conducted by the members of the General Sessions Committee, who consider the overall program content. So in the first round, abstracts that scored really highly are going to get accepted and rejected kind of regardless of what they're about. And the second round is where we think more of, oh, geez, we've accepted 50 abstracts already and we don't have a single presentation on transplant psychiatry. Let's start looking for the best transplant abstract that we have. In 2023, we accepted about 40% of abstracts for the live meeting. There were a total of 146 abstracts submitted between workshops and between the old terminology of workshops and symposia. 129 were submitted for live workshops, 16 for virtual symposia. And at the end of that, we accepted 45 live workshops and 12 virtual symposia selected. Some presenters have been and will be asked to change format if indicated based on review. So the way that we kind of look at it is if you submit a live workshop and it scores well, but the committee feels it might be more appropriate for a virtual general session, you might be asked to transition your live workshop into a virtual general session, where we would never ask a virtual session to move live because lots of people have different reasons why they may or may not be able to make the meeting in November in Miami. Next slide. I'll hand it over.
Thank you so much. So next we're going to move to Dr. Marianne Fireman to talk to us about pre-conference course submission.
Thank you. Hopefully you'll hear me. Let me know if you can't. I'm Marianne Fireman. I'm chair of the pre-conference courses subcommittee. And I'll give you a kind of a quick overview of the pre-conference day, which is Wednesday in the morning. We have the updates course, which I believe is free to members who've registered for the meeting. Basically, we don't take submissions for that. Those are invited speakers. We're hoping to have a very exciting lineup for the morning, so we hope you'll all be able to attend. At the same time, we'll be having the advocacy course, which you've heard about as well. There's also going to be an invited course for the advanced practice practitioners that day. I'm not sure of the timing. The part we take submissions for is the Wednesday afternoon skills courses, which I'm going to give you an overview of right now. They'll be on Wednesday, November 6th. They're in the afternoon from 1 to 5. Your audience can be any attendee at any level of training or career, which admittedly makes it a little bit hard to target your course and your abstract. People are paying extra for these courses, so we're looking for very high quality courses that teach specific skills. The faculty of the courses must be faculty members at their institutions. They can be MDs, DOs, or advanced practice nurses. You have a limit of 5 faculty members. One of the faculty members should be a member of the academy, and you should have at least one mid to senior level recognized expert in the field, if not multiple experts in the field for your submission. Trainees, including fellows, cannot be faculty for the pre-conference courses. If a trainee will be faculty by the time of the meeting, that is okay, but you have to make a note of it on the submission that the person who's a fellow is going to be advanced to whatever level of faculty at their institution. We also prefer and courses that do not include people all from the same institution. Can I get the next slide, please? Okay. So if, and also people can only be in one pre-conference course. So if your group is submitting 3 pre-conference courses and you have people in each of those courses one person who's in multiple courses, we will be asking you, if we accepted them all, to substitute people. We will look at all the submissions, but one person can't teach in more than one course. And if somebody's part of the research colloquium, they also cannot be faculty for the pre-conference courses, because we can't have people are paying to hear your speakers, hear the skills you're teaching, and we can't have faculty just leaving to go do something else. So it's expected that the faculty members for the course will be there for the entire time, and they will be focused on teaching that course. So what are we looking for? We're looking for courses that teach specific relevant clinical skills. So an abstract that sort of says we're going to talk about agitation probably would not get accepted unless you tell us exactly what you're going to teach, how you're going to teach people to manage agitation, different kinds of agitation, and hopefully have specific cases. We want the courses to be interactive. So if we're not looking for 4 hours of didactics, it's pretty hard for your audience to sit through that. So successful courses in the past have been one of the course that taught EKG assessment, where they taught people how to measure QT intervals, read the EKGs. The audience was quite involved in trying to figure it out. Last year, there was a very successful course on assessment of the complex critical care patient, which was very interactive, lots of cases, things that would change. So the audience really needs to be involved. If your course is largely didactic, but we are very excited about the topic, we may ask you to revise. We're also looking for submissions that are going to appeal to a wide audience and attract attendees. So you may have a fascinating course, but if only 5 people in the academy are potentially interested in it, we probably wouldn't accept it, because we're looking for courses that are going to attract attendees, appeal to a wide variety of people, and teach very specific skills. So how do you submit it? It's the usual abstract submission process, and you can look through it. If you have any questions about a submission or a potential submission, please contact me or one of the other members of our committee, and we will try to be helpful in guiding you about submitting your course. To make it more interactive, some groups in the past have actually had some pre-recorded content or pre-work, things to read, things to work on. So when people come to the course, they have some background, and you don't have to spend an hour doing something didactic to give them the background. if you do such a thing, it's usually useful to spend a few minutes at least reviewing the background, because I can tell you from past experience, not everybody views the pre-recorded content. Pre-recorded content should be limited to 1.5 to 2 hours. The Academy staff will work with you to get that done. Or if you want to have handouts that are available in advance, papers, whatever, and you want people to read them, you can actually get those posted. So question arises, can we have 5 presenters doing pre-recorded content and a different 5 presenters in the live session? The answer to that is emphatically no. You have to only have a maximum of 5 presenters, and they need to be the same people. You can, in your slides, certainly give credit to other people who've contributed or assisted, but you can only have 5 presenters. Can I get the next slide? Okay, so what's a successful abstract is one, interest, or is this going to be something of wide interest? Is it original? You know, have we had that same course every year for the last 10 years? We might want to skip a year or two because it's feeling like a little stale, and maybe we want the organizers to submit next year or the year after and have some really good updates then. How are you going to teach the skills? You know, you need to delineate in the abstract how you're going to do this. How the abstract asks exactly how are you going to spend the 4 hours, and what's the schedule for the 4 hours? How is the time going to be spent? Your abstract should be well written, very clear what you're going to do. Speaker strength is really important. Like, who are these people? Are they experts in the field? Do they have, you know, are they recognized for their clinical skill and their ability to teach? We're definitely looking for speakers from more than one institution. If everybody's from the same institution, we always feel like, oh, they're going to all, you know, they may have all the same perspective, and we would like perspectives from different institutions. Again, no speaker can participate in more than one skills course. So if you're involved in several submissions and they all get accepted, you're going to have to pick one and then identify a substitute for something else that might have been submitted. If speakers in your lineup are involved in the research colloquium, either as a participant or as an expert, they can't be part of pre-conference course. The research colloquium is going all day. Now, if the speaker is only involved in the morning of the research colloquium, that would be okay. But if they're involved in the afternoon, that you'll have to find somebody else. We do have deadlines. We review all the slides for the accepted courses, and we want all those slides submitted to us by Wednesday, August 28th, because our committee needs to review those slides, give feedback, and ask for any necessary revisions. And if we ask for revisions, please send them in a timely fashion, because we need to get those back to the Academy so that they're posted in time for the actual meeting. So that's, thank you for your time. I will probably need to leave a little early, but happy if you send any questions in to answer them via email.
Thank you so much. I see if we have Dr. Chandan Kandai here. We're next going to talk about how to integrate DEI into your submissions and how to further the Academy's DEI mission through the annual meeting process.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ernst. So again, everyone, thanks for joining us, and hope everyone is enjoying is going to be listening to this recorded later. My name is Chandan. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, or DEI subcommittee. I'm going to be talking about the returning DEI statement requirement, how to make the most of it. Next slide, please. So we started this last year. It's pretty awesome. So we're doing it again. Thank you so much, Dr. Bauer and team. So ACP remains committed to DEI and encourages submissions to include one or both of the following: either to address inequities in the information presented, including but not limited to ways in which the topic impacts individuals from historically marginalized groups, Or speaker panel should reflect the diversity of our academy, including participation from speakers of diverse identity, professional background, geography, institution, and career stage. So all submissions, poster, workshop, so on and so forth, need a response with a 100-word limit to how or why your submission does or could advance diversity, equity, and inclusion in talk or presented and or speaker panel. Next slide. So this can be pretty daunting, especially not as familiar with DEI, what to do, but there's a lot of different ways that you can contribute to DEI with your submission. And we're going to be talking about 2 of the major ways. Next slide. So the first is just in the topics, the information that you're presenting. So different ways to think about DEI. And the idea is that you may be doing DEI and you don't even know it. One is to document, critique health and healthcare disparities in the clinical topic you're presenting, to discuss ways to promote health equity and reduce the disparities, and then improve the health of historically marginalized populations within your clinical topic. And honestly, if no research evidence exists on it, it's discuss why. Don't just be like, oh, we don't know this. Like, talk about maybe the historical reasons why there's not research, and then suggest, hey, these are ways we could maybe study this in the future. Present examples of public service for diverse populations, like presentations, outreach, partnerships with community organizations to improve health and wellness in the community. Incorporate health and healthcare disparities, health equity, and structural competency into core educational content in CL. Even things like just the style of how you learn, like developing using pedagogies that address different learning styles and or learning disabilities. So for example, maybe we're not all like auditory learners. So if you have like ways of doing presenting information both auditory and a visual standpoint, that's also embracing DEI. Advancing equitable access to education outreach for historically marginalized groups. And then developing, utilizing resources and tools that encourage recruitment and retention of diverse learners, faculty, and staff into our amazing field of CL, and how to assist attendees from historically marginalized groups towards academic and professional advancement within their institutions and ACLP. So many different ways in just the information presenting you can embrace DEI. Next slide. Another way you can show DEI is in the speaker panel itself, like who are you having present your work? So ways you can do that is by including speakers of diverse identity, which is included, but not just limited to age and race, but also ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, immigration status, disability. Incorporate speakers from different professional backgrounds. So our non-psychiatrist physician colleagues, APPs, social workers and nurses, PTOT basic scientists, engineers. Include speakers from varying career stages. So don't just have all like mid and late career people, but also have trainees, early career, have a mix. And also mentor and sponsor speakers from early career stages and historically marginalized groups. So next slide. So this is an example of a DEI statement we got last year. Significant racial disparities have been well described in multiple stages of the transplant process. In particular, Black and Hispanic Latinx patients are more likely than white patients to be declined transplantation due to the psychosocial evaluation. This evaluation presents a critical opportunity to identify social determinants of health that disproportionately impact minoritized patients. Our presentation aims to present a developmental lens for which to assess and intervene upon these psychosocial factors to improve outcomes. The case presented is of a Hispanic female whose pre-transplant evaluation identified numerous structural barriers to care which impact her treatment course. So great, love it. Talking about it both on a bigger sense and also in the case you're presenting. Next slide. This one is from a case report that was accepted as a poster. This case report reflects the unique benefits the liaison aspect of CL psychiatry can bring in caring for historically marginalized populations. More specifically, our patient reflects the intersectionality of multiple structural vulnerabilities, as she is female, Black, incarcerated, with prior diagnoses of serious mental illness. We also speak to how building a coalition via a multidisciplinary care team can best serve patients in historically marginalized, underserved, vulnerable populations. Our speaker panel reflects the same multidisciplinary aspect by being trainee-led with an internal medicine resident and medical student going into PM&R, mentored by an early career CL attending. So you see here, we're talking about not just the topic presented, but also the speaker panel itself for the case report. Next slide. So again, this is still a fairly new thing that we've been doing with the annual meeting. So if you have any questions about this process, please feel free to email myself or my co-chair, Dr. Ariadna Foray, at our emails, and also be around for a Q&A at the end of this workshop.
Thank you so much. So in just a few moments, we'll move on to the Q&A. I just wanted to try to put it all together with, 10 tips for crafting successful submissions for the meeting. And I wanted to acknowledge my co-chair for our mentorship subcommittee, Dr. Scott Beach, for a lot of the original ideas behind some of these slides. So, and I think this is all material that you've heard from the speakers already today, but just, a couple things to think about putting it together. One, as you think about your idea, think about whether your idea works best in which of the formats you've heard about: a paper, a poster, a workshop, or a course. The second tip, as you heard, really keep the meeting theme in mind. Don't go overboard. Not every submission has to be linked to the meeting theme, because certainly the meeting will include a diverse array of types of sessions, topics, and content. But certainly if you have work that aligns well with the meeting theme, absolutely keep that in mind and mention that in your submission. 3, as you heard a little bit also, think about whether your focus is on process or content. So are you trying to be didactic and transfer knowledge in your presentation, or is this going to be more something that focuses on building skills, whether that's building skills in something such as reading neuroimaging, as you heard, or building skills in developing scholarship. I went to a great session, I remember last year, on advancing the DEI work through scholarship in CL psychiatry. That was a very much focus on skill building. We've had sessions on building mentorship initiatives and programs. So think about that for your submission: content or process. As you heard, institutional diversity really, really does matter. I think as tempting as it is to submit with all people from your own institution, really think about reaching out to colleagues, even if you don't know people that well. Maybe you're on a committee with someone, or you've met them briefly, or you heard someone speak at this presentation. Reach out to somebody, particularly for submissions that are very process oriented. It's very, very helpful to have perspectives from different institutions. Knowing your target audience and ensure it's large enough. You heard a little bit about that today, that probably there will be some niche content and topics accepted, but generally the audience really should be a general CL psychiatry audience. So think about, is the audience, big enough for a workshop on this topic? Will there be enough interest? And if not, is there a way I can think about revising my submission to make it applicable and appealing to a large enough audience? Thinking about your co-presenters who bring a unique perspective. You heard that from multiple speakers today, whether that means a different identity, a different training background, a different stage of the career. Really think about what perspective they can bring in. Some of the best presentations that I have been part of have not been with CL psychiatrists, have been with hospitalists, social workers, other people whom we've invited, and they really enjoy coming to the ACLP meeting as well. So it's a nice opportunity to learn from each other. Something that wasn't mentioned, but something that I would encourage everyone to think about, is considering sponsorship from our SIGs, our special interest groups, or committees or subcommittees, particularly if you're a member of one of those. But even if you're not a member and you have an idea, reaching out. All of the SIGs and subcommittees are likely thinking about submissions for the annual meeting, and submissions that I think align with the mission or the work of that particular SIG or subcommittee can be very much appreciated. So that can be helpful as well. Also, as you heard, really trying to allow the reviewer to picture as much as possible what is going to happen. So the more concrete you can be, part of why that abstract on reading neuroimaging was so highly rated, because it was very concrete. You could look at that abstract and know exactly what learning objectives would be met by that session. So, really do try to do that, what each speaker is going to be presenting on, what will be happening in the session. The more specific information you can get, the more the reviewers will know what to expect at the session. You heard a little bit of engaging the audience. So, I think for the general sessions in particular, it's very much encouraged to have some sort of interactive component, not be entirely didactic. So, you want to think creatively about how to do that, but of course, don't get too creative, because you don't want to lose the audience. I think we've all been part of sessions where they say, okay, now we're going to do breakout groups, and, half the room leaves. So, we don't want that to happen either, but, I do think breaking up the didactic components, and not just lecturing at people for 75 minutes, but breaking people up into small groups, or pair and share, turning to the person next to you, polling audiences. A lot of people use cases very successfully, where they have several different cases. They'll break the groups up. People can divide up and go through cases. Sometimes there are different kind of thought or other exercises. that you can do. So, think about that, ways that you might change your practice. There are lots of different ways. You can look online for suggestions as well. So make sure you have some way of really engaging the audience. And then the last tip, as you heard about, I think from Michael and others, is really think about your abstract submission as a form of mentorship. As the chair of the mentorship subcommittee, this is an issue that is sort of near and dear to my heart, that, I think as you are thinking of ideas, turn to colleagues, turn to peers, turn to near peers, maybe people a little bit more senior. You can turn to more senior people at your own institution or through the ACLP. All of the speakers today have encouraged you that you could reach out to them with questions. Really think about this as a process. And if you are a mentor, think about this as an opportunity to mentor your trainees or junior faculty on putting together submissions, everything from thinking through what, an optimal topic would be, how to write an abstract, how to think about your audience. These are all really, opportunities for really in situ mentorship work and great mentorship work happening, in the flesh. So with that, I'm going to stop. That's sort of the end of our formal presentation. I wanted to thank all of our speakers and participants. And really, we have some time for, Q&A. We have a number of our speakers still here. So feel free, if you have a question, I guess you can raise a hand electronically. Looks like there were a couple of questions in the chat, and I think that people have answered those. Zachary.
Hi, my name is Zachary. I'm an adult psychiatrist out of Chicago. I really appreciate you putting on this seminar. You answered a lot of my questions that I had coming into it. One lingering one was really just sort of about the appropriateness and how to submit that. So we had a case, and I'll keep it very brief, but it was a case report that I was thinking of just initially presenting either as an oral report or a case presentation. And then it just turned out that there were so many teaching topics around the case and so many ethical questions and a lot of angles that we felt were really pertinent to the case that we're going to present it as a session. So my question is, I'm going to write it up for a proposal for a session. You had mentioned that if it's more appropriate for a case report or an oral report, you can designate it to that. But should I submit as both and kind of see which one ends up being more appropriate?
I think that one's probably for me. This is Michael. So what you can do is if, so the two options are the brief oral papers, which is a 10-minute oral presentation, or a poster. So if you think that the content would do well in that oral presentation format, you can submit it that way. When you submit it as a brief oral paper, there will be a checkbox option. If it's not accepted for that limited number of brief oral presentations, then it will be rolled over and our committee will consider it as a poster. So that would be, I think, what you're asking about.
I see. Is there something similar for a general session in the same way where, because the topics that we would propose for the general session might be too broad for or too multidisciplinary for, I think, for like an oral paper. So is that option available in a general session proposal as well?
No. And again, it's, I think, because of the timing. Like if you think about the timing slot, a general session is previously 90, now 75 minutes long. When you look at the program from last year, they had 4 or 5 brief oral papers kind of stuffed into that time slot. So we don't have the option to convert from general session to brief oral paper. We do have the option to convert from from live general session to virtual general session.
I see. Okay.
Okay. Michael, if I can ask more of like a hypothetical question, Zach, this may be what you're getting at. Like, y'all could have like really interesting cases that bring up a whole bunch of really cool topics. So then the question is like, what do you do? So at least in my head, what I was thinking, Michael, was like, if there's a really cool question that it's asking, like, let's say hypothetically, like and this happens, spoiler, like last week, we had a case of like a pregnant lady in Texas who was depressed and suicidal because she really wanted an abortion and she can't because Texas is being Texas. Like, that's a really interesting case, but there's so many different ways you could do it. That one case wouldn't make a lot of sense to do like a 75-minute workshop on, but the idea of, like legislation around abortion and the mental health effects, taking that case and then having multiple other cases, or having a more of like a background of like legislative, that would make a good workshop because it's bigger than just one case. Is that so cases can maybe bring up topics that we make better for like a workshop, but it wouldn't be just a workshop by itself. Is that right, Michael?
Yeah, I think that sounds right. I'll let Molly answer that as well. So I agree. Either the posters or brief oral papers would be taking kind of a slice of that kind of multi-facet approach. And I think as the content is kind of more developed and more polished, it's probably more appropriate to have multiple speakers approaching different aspects of the topic in a general session, as Chandan is saying. Otherwise, it's certainly, if this is something that's kind of in development, you may also choose that you and some of your colleagues say, okay, I'm going to take this aspect of it or this aspect of it, and each of those could maybe stand alone as a poster or brief oral paper. They may
Yeah.
not all be accepted, but that would be one way of potentially doing it too.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I see. This is really helpful. Thank you.
And if you were going to convert it into a general session, I think might be helpful to have a brief, like, for that particular topic, this is the legislative overview. And then you could have different cases, ideally from people in the states that are affected by these legislative changes. Like your example of the pregnant woman in Texas, another example of a pregnant woman in another state, and then a third example of someone who is postpartum and incarcerated in a third state.
I see. So having it not surround a single case could make it more would make the topic in the session like a little bit more robust, as opposed to having a single case that asks lots of questions.
And then Anne, you can disagree with me here. I would say generally, general sessions that tend to be accepted either have 0 or multiple cases.
Yeah, I think that's probably accurate. I mean, this is Ann Gross. The timing of our general sessions is different this year, right? So
yeah, so that might change.
We're going to learn a little bit with kind of our experiment around the shortening of the session and how that kind of impacts, I think, the types of submissions that we get. I think in general, Molly's correct. We see from the 90-minute sessions historically, often, several cases that are presented that kind of diversify a topic, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. That being said, I think you probably could, again, depending on the case and what types of facets or questions it brings up. I mean, again, thinking about the theme this year around integrative medicine is certainly captures a lot of broad categories within CL psychiatry. So depending on the content of the case, you could also really think about it within more of a kind of biopsychosocial plus model that captures integrative medicine concepts, and probably make it very applicable for a general session. So it has a lot to do with the structure, I think, in the case and kind of what different types of components you could bring into it. Mm-hmm. But I think what you're hearing Molly and Michael say is if your scope is fairly narrow, right, and you're really trying to drive home like 1 or 2 pretty specific points, submitting within kind of Michael's categories may be more appropriate. If you're really thinking about using 1 or 2 cases to highlight, 75 minutes worth of content-rich information, again, thinking about it from different categories or using different cases to highlight the concepts and themes, then I think you could submit it. It's hard to answer without knowing the specifics, Zach, but I hope that's helpful. And I would also say that, people are available, as you guys are kind of developing your ideas, if you wanted to follow up with more specific questions as you get closer to April 1st.
I really appreciate that. Yeah, I won't take up too much more time, but yeah, very, very helpful. I'll relay this to the rest of the team. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we think this might be one of the, we're hoping anyways, this might be one of the benefits of shortening, but offering more general sessions. This was really related to feedback that, attendees, or excuse me, people who are submitting abstracts, really want their opportunities for their content and their ideas and their themes to be represented. And so more slots really gives us a better opportunity to do so. So I think we're going to be learning a lot this year about the impact of shortening and offering more sessions and what that does for the diversity of topics that we're able to support.
And apologies if anything I presented immediately becomes out of date when we review all the abstracts and think about how we're putting the meeting together.
Yeah, we're going to learn a lot this year.
Yeah, that's always a risk.
Thank you.
One other comment, Carrie, not related to Zach's question, but just to make sure that folks know that we are absolutely supportive of content around PEDCL and lifespan content this year. That was really the focus of the theme at last year's meeting, which was really rich in terms of content that we were able to deliver. But I want to also make sure people are aware that is absolutely welcome to this year as well. We focused a lot on adults, I think, in the last hour together, but just to make sure people, if any of you are peds folks, we welcome your submissions this year as well. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, well, then if not, we'll wrap it up. Again, look for the recording in the next few days, hopefully on the website for the meeting, and feel free to reach out if any other questions come up. And the slides will be available, will be posted as well, along with the recording, so you can have them in review and have all of our contact info too.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.